You're ready for it, Ryan. See, you shouldn't have even told it. You should have just said, oh yeah, we're ready.
Exactly.
We're ready for you.
Okay,
Exactly.
We-
I want us to talk. I will engage.
we are
I'll just let
live,
you lead.
we are recording, we have audio and video, we have 2 minutes until start, so I'm gonna mute us for a second. It's 3 o'clock, we're calling the start of the meeting. We're here again for the CAN Advisor Reads. We're still working our way through the Post-Pandemic Liberal Arts College, a manifesto for reinvention by authors Volk and Benedicts. We've had a good setup with Sam Langen, Greg Ike, Jesse Shoemaker to get us to understand the kinds of problems that we're talking about and the terms we'll use to try to solve them. Last week, Dr. Jeff Stoll did an amazing job of talking us through some of the changes we could make to the classroom and learning environment. And now we're going to talk about what Volk and Benedicts think we need to change about the people involved in this equation. And Bobby Kingery is our official lead for the discussion, but you may hear from Ryan Howard also, because he read this part 3 times. And there's maybe some reason for that. And Bobby will talk about that. I'm going to turn the floor over to them because it's their show and not mine. And I'll be watching the chat for your brilliant comments.
Okay, he handled that really well. He didn't take sides with either of us. I'll start the conversation, but then I'm probably going to pass it over. Previously we've talked about the classroom culture, the learning environment that we want to create. And so this week we're talking about the people we need to make those changes if we indeed need to make those changes. And I think I will turn it over first because one of the first things they talked about were changes within our admissions processes. And since you're more the expert on that than I will let you take hold of this section.
Sure, yeah. So in lieu of the awkward miscommunication that we had a little bit there,
Thank you.
we both kind of had some preparation for today, but these are just some highlights from the chapter along with some questions that I kind of came up with to discuss as a group. But yeah, as Bobby said, this section kind of talks about, the important people that are involved in this process and, what we could do either a little differently or kind of taking some of this information and seeing what we're already doing. But, I had to actually go back a little bit, a couple pages to really see what the foundation was setting up for why we're talking about the people too. So, the background of like the 3 global recommendations that they were talking about, it's like every decision made by the institution should be made in service of their mission, and then formulating an authentic and internal solidarity, and then collaboration being key. So a quote that I took from that section there was like, only in unity is the strength that we require. So obviously they talked a lot about this whole getting away from this empty notion of we're all in this together. And then actually putting forth what we can do to unify ourselves. So I guess just kind of keeping those three things in mind as we jump into the admissions part, which is kind of where my expertise falls into. But they talked a lot about this, adopting an admissions process that replaces false choice with actual choice. And I found that to be very intriguing and very eye-opening with some of the things, and wanted to learn more about it. But one of the first things they talked about was need blind admissions. I was really hoping for some extra help with understanding this one in the sense of, were they suggesting like, so for the first time I read through it is need blind in the sense of financial. So like, are we admitting people just because they can get in, or are we admitting the right people that can actually afford to go here? And it's like,
Well, and I struggled with that, but it's kind of the struggle I have with the book as a whole at times, because they're coming out of liberal arts colleges, but they're not liberal arts like regional EIU. They're the liberal arts college where you pay $80,000 a year to attend, and their student body up to this point, from what I've read, tended to be the people who could pay that out of pocket. They weren't going into debt to go to this institution. So when I saw the need blind part, I thought, well, I think there's a section of population we are looking at for that. But I do not believe that is our main focus, because most of our students cannot afford to pay out of pocket to attend EIU. If I'm correct, you know much more
Oh,
than
yeah.
I.
Absolutely, I completely agree with that. So that's why when I was reading that, I was like,
Yeah.
But then, the next three, sections for that whole ordeal, the need blind thing and the false choice versus the actual choice, really set up these three things that all went together. It's like changes to our admission criteria, revisions of the recruitment process, and revamping the application process. And it's like, for me, I've been in my role for 6 years now, and we've done those three things every single year. So it's like, yeah, we're doing that. And then you throw a pandemic in there at the same time. And it's like, now we're just changing everything up. So I can honestly say that's something that is just an ever-changing thing. It's just become an annual thing now, part of our staff training and initiatives and Josh's strategic enrollment plans and all that good stuff. So definitely all those changes are occurring around here. But what are, from outside the admissions perspective, you guys work with students too. So what are ways that you see EIU currently doing some of these things that are being suggested, or just essentially ways that we can improve that? Especially from the students that you work with.
I think we do a good job of recruiting a wide variety of students. In the book, they talked about, going after the non-homogeneous group. We weren't just going to look at middle-class white children or students. I think because of who we are, that changed a long time ago. So I didn't think that related. I think what's getting interesting for us are some of the things that we're doing to follow the crowd, test optional. I don't, as a rule, believe in standardized tests, possibly because I don't perform well on them. But I think looking at it from a student success side of it, I wonder what else we could be looking at. They mentioned in the book not having an essay, but instead having everyone do an individual interview. And I just thought, well, how's that going to work?
Right. That's why I even had a follow-up question. It's like, are there things that are even possible, like at our institution, that being one of them? It's like, oh, we can't really do that. That would take up so much time.
Well, or we'd have to use so many additional people. It couldn't just be admissions. We'd have to branch out and have advisors do that. Because I agree, talking to a student may give us a better feel for their interests and perhaps their preparation. But I just don't know that we can actually do that.
And then if you get too many different people doing that, then how do you kind of, in a sense, standardize that? So.
But
Which
maybe
brings us
something
back.
that you can really see where their motivation is,
Mhm.
because if it's parent motivation, they're not making it. I mean,
Right.
we know that from the beginning. So how do we Because I hate to see the ones that come in and struggle, and then they don't get a degree at the end, and then they have tons of debt.
Exactly.
And I feel we're doing a disservice to that, but I don't know how really to combat that, because this is what I'm supposed to do, because, this is really an age where, and not all parents, but you're seeing, you go to college,
Right,
but that's not the end. You don't have to, but I think and we're higher ed, we want people to go to college, but I also don't want people to come here and then have tons of debt. It would be different if it was like, I think it's Germany, higher ed is paid for.
right.
Pre-K through higher ed is paid for, and they track you. So you get tracked, and if you have a certain score, but it's paid for. So if you try and that's not for you, then it's difficult. So how do we be the business like we talked about last time? How do we be the business and get customers to come in here, but also not bring customers in that really don't need it,
Right, well, and that
or won't be
plays into my
successful.
alley.
I guess it won't be successful
Yeah.
with it.
Plays into that career side of it, where one of the challenges is there's not enough career development happening in K through 12. So people think I have to go to college when they'd be amazing electricians and make more than probably most of us in the room, and enjoy that career, but they believe the only way people will respect me or think I have value is if I've earned a college degree. And that happens well before we
Right,
become
we
part of
get
the
it. Yeah,
picture.
definitely.
So I think that's where a lot of that challenge comes from. So,
Oh, yeah, and definitely on, outside of like the vocational track, but on our end, some of the other things that I know that we just did recently, we just added this new scholarship, which I found really hard to promote. But I'll explain why though, if you guys haven't heard of it yet, but it's our Strategic Success Engagement Award, or Student Success and Engagement Award, excuse me. So what this is for students that don't qualify for a scholarship. So this is the scholarship that you get if you didn't get any of our other scholarships. So as long as you meet admission criteria, but you're below like our automatic merit scholarship money, this is $1,000 scholarship for you. But you have to take some time to personalize your MyEIU account. So like we were all mentioning, like this individual interview practice, this is like our version of that. So we're making them put down their interests, what they do now, what they're involved in high school, things like that. So taking this, that's why we don't have an essay, for the most part, because the standard for the GPA, and we're test optional, it's just, that's it. You got the GPA, you're getting in kind of thing. And then if you want this additional scholarship, because you didn't have a super high GPA, you can still earn some money, but you got to put a little effort in and tell us about yourself, what you do kind of thing. So trying to make it a little bit more accessible and affordable on that sense, but yeah, it was just fun to read about on, from what I do and then looking at what they're suggesting and what we can actually do versus what we're already doing. Anything else on the admissions side of things?
I think it's important to talk about, we've discussed throughout this series that this is a book written from the perspective of small liberal arts colleges, or SLACs. But even deeper here, we need to talk about that we have 2 faculty members writing this book. And so we're really getting the faculty member lens of what admissions is, and Bobby may choose to highlight some other places later where it shows up in the rest of this section, but just in general, important to know that doesn't mean it's necessarily right or wrong, or definitely no malintent, just their perception of what admissions is going to be skewed by their lens, right?
well, I got the feel that they thought that the faculty should be the people doing those interviews, and I think about perhaps in that environment on that type of campus, you would have faculty who thought that was really important and wonderful. I just don't know that I think it would play on our campus, and where do you put the undeclared students? So if I think that you know, you're in education, so anybody who's thinking about education, someone in your area should interview them. Well, then does that mean, you know, where do we put those undeclared? Do they go to career services? I'm not faculty. You know, so some of it, again, I think it was the type of institution.
And I think also with the interviews, if you do faculty like that, then they get a connection with faculty.
Right.
Because really, they don't see a lot of faculty, like in open houses and things. I mean, there are some faculty out there, but in my department, it's advisors.
Yeah.
That come out and, because we know the whole program. But I think to have that connection may, you know, especially as freshmen coming
Oh, yeah.
in, that they probably wouldn't get their major faculty members until later on, but they have, you know, so that's also where maybe mentorship would be something that would, you know, again, if that's on the faculty though, are we stretching them too far? But something to get the fresh, you know, the people that are first in, to get them a connection with
Right.
somebody within their department, because a lot of times they're taking gen eds. So how did we, you know, do that to help them be successful, to say, look, this is, and we do that a little bit, I think we do, like student panels and things like that, but I don't know how to push that a little bit further, so we really get like that coaching mentality, that academic coaching mentality to, you know, say this is, you know, I know we've tried that in the foundations class, but this is what you need to do.
Yeah.
And I don't know if coming from an upperclassman, I don't know, it's just a kind of to think outside the box. Because we're in a generation that we've never seen before, we're in, you know, fact, you know, students that we just haven't seen students like this before, and the pandemic is really kind of, and I hate to put that on, it's all the cause, but you ask any educator from K through 12, and they will definitely tell you that this has, you know, even the ones that were babies during the pandemic, they're in preschool, kindergarten now, and they still see there's still a lot of development that they didn't get because they were at home for so long, couldn't go out, so.
Do we still use that US News and World Report, you know, criteria or listing?
Yes, yes, we do.
Okay. Well, they
Uh,
make mention in the book that we should sever ties with that.
It's, it was so eye-opening to read that, because just my office is so keen on the badges, you know, and whenever we grab the badges and we can hold on to them, and US News and World Report ranked us this, and that. And so it's just, you know, that's what they strive for, and that's what we put in all of our publications and our presentations and everything too. So it was really interesting to read about them wanting to sever ties with that. I was like, oh, I never heard this perspective before. I was like, why would you not want to, you know, recognize this? And the process to get that, it's like, oh, okay, so.
And I think some of that may be, again, their type of institution where they're competing at a level we aren't. And some of that, if you're simply selecting an institution because they ranked in the top 10, is that really the right match for you, or are you just looking at that ranking? You know, and that's what I think they're trying to get people to look beyond.
Yes, and what I really liked that one of those authors of the chapter had brought to attention is, I don't know how much time you spent in US News and World Report, but the ranking system, there's so many different ones. So like, what was it? So I don't know if it was affordability, either way, the example that I'm gonna try to give here is like, I was trying to look up where we ranked in the US News and World Report as like affordability, because we strive on that. We're the lowest cost of attendance in the state of Illinois for public institutions, you know, trying to find some of that stuff, just kind of researching. And then I thought I was being Sherlock Holmes and got on there. It's like, well, actually we're ranked like 22nd or something. Like, what does this mean? I brought it to somebody's attention. It's because I was in a different filtered list. So I'm in a list with institutions that like offer PhD programs.
Yeah.
And I'm sitting here going, okay, but these are still the schools that we're competing against. So it's like, okay, so we're ranked this in this list, but if you look at this list, we're ranked this. So I was really intrigued to see that one of the authors actually brought that up in the chapter. And I was like, yeah, it's frustrating, and it's a little misleading, but I mean, I see where they went with it, to be like, okay, if you want to be more competitive and have some recognition, you're going to be in this pool of schools for this criteria. But there's so many of those lists that it just kind of makes it hard to see, like, okay, so where actually do you fall?
And I know parents may look at that list, I doubt it, students look at that
I
list.
doubt if most students do.
They're gonna, word of mouth, probably number one, you know,
Yeah.
friends, family, teachers, whatever, go, I mean, that's
Mhm.
really what you're I mean,
Cause then we show up at, you know, like fairs or like on the transfer side, we do these things called State University Transfer Day, where we get together with all the state schools and we can provide updates and have fairs and work with students. And then, my time comes up there, get like a 7-minute spiel about Eastern, and then like I'll say something about, you know, lowest cost of attendance, or we were ranked #1 in this category, and then Illinois State gets up and says the exact same thing.
Yeah.
And then everybody gets confused, and it's like, okay,
because
well.
it's a different
It's
list.
like, you should have said yours differently. And they're like, well, I could have said mine differently, but it's like, we get the criteria.
Yeah,
But we fall into different lists based on like school size and what programs we offer and things like that. But it's like, how many lowest cost of attendance schools are there in Illinois? You're all the lowest. So,
Well, and I think about these lists, because I think, right, it was a great point they brought up, and I'm glad Lisa said something about it. Other industries get caught in this trap too. If you're gonna buy a brand new car, you're likely to look at Car and Driver. If you're gonna buy a new microwave, Consumer Reports. Even more annoying now that Consumer Reports is largely behind a paywall. And so what used to be kind of like a public service is, it's their money-making thing. But you better believe that GE and, you know, all those other brands, they want that Consumer Reports,
Mhm.
like best microwave for the price, or, you know, most versatile, whatever those badges are. They want it. And then at some point you're like trapped in this system with no way to claw out without just like.
And how much did they pay for those
Right.
badges?
well, and I think the other thing is, you know, we have this mixed blessing, yes, we're affordable. But then, you know, you see in some students' mind, that means we're not as good as, right? You know, we're not the University of Illinois. Well, yeah, we are. Doesn't mean you can't come here and get a great education that's perfect for you. But I worry sometimes when we're like, oh, we're the most affordable. Well, does that mean we're cheap?
Mhm.
Yeah, and I know it doesn't, but in people's head, does that translate into, I'm not going to get the same opportunities or the same experience as if I went to Harvard? Well, and no, you're not going to get the same experience. But I do think that's interesting when we're looking for those badges or those labels. What's the negative of it? Yeah,
Well, and I don't see any consumer scientists in our chat today, but we've all heard about those reports. Like if you're buying a new toaster, you're probably not gonna get the cheapest one because you're thinking, well, that one's gonna tear up like in 6 months and then I'll
Yeah.
just have to buy another one. But you're probably not gonna buy the $100 toaster, right? And so you're gonna shoot for something that's a good in the middle, like, okay, this is probably quality and value all in one. And so, I mean, I do appreciate that we use the word affordable, right? We don't say that we're the cheapest,
right.
Yeah.
but phrasing matters. Okay.
well, and I think, you know, as we talk about the labels that students are looking for, it leads really well into that faculty section. Where one of the things they said is when hiring faculty, you know, one of the things that at least at their type of institution, they're looking at is what program did you come out of? Where's your PhD from? How highly rated is your institution? And I found it ironic that they're like, well, that's what we're looking at. We shouldn't, but that's what we're looking at. And we're going, but we don't want to be judged, you know, as an institution. So I thought that was a little interesting.
Oh, yeah. I agree too. So, since you had that segue into faculty for sure, and kind of comparing that to, because you're looking at who you're hiring, okay, so most affordable institution, you know, what am I getting for the price?
Yeah.
But, so if that's the avenue that we're gonna take, I just feel as if somewhere you gotta meet in the middle with who you're gonna hire to teach those classes and be in that department. Because if you're gonna hire the most prestigious person for the job kind of thing, you know, and now their salary is gonna increase because of that, and now everything's gonna shift finance wise. So it's like, okay, so we're the lowest cost of attendance. Yes, we want qualified candidates, but do we have to go for the one that came out of the most prestigious institution? Or is it the best candidate for the job kind of thing? So,
And as they stated, and I've heard this on Eastern's campus the whole time I've been here. Yes, we want people who are, you know, are well-versed in their field. We want them to be published, to be good researchers, but most importantly, we want them to teach, right? We want individuals who want to teach our students. So if you come to Eastern and you think you're only going to do research and maybe teach one class every couple of years, they're not a good fit for this institution, at least for what we say we want. So,
And then
And
I'll
I
be.
think sometimes with, you know, PhDs, when you get in those prestigious ones, you're not being taught by,
no.
you're being taught by the grad systems. And also with, you know, we really want teachers here, and some of the really prestigious top faculty or researchers, they can't teach out of the paper bag.
No,
I mean, I hate to say that, and not anybody at Eastern, but, you know, but I think we are, you know, we are a teaching, that's how we, you know, to get the information over, and I think that's important.
Then you get someone like me on the complete flip side of that is all I wanna do is teach. You know, it's like, let me teach the classes, but you make that really hard for me because I don't have PhDs. I don't want anything to do with research. Sorry, I did my research. I got my master's. I'm done with that. Let me teach. So definitely, that's where I got real interested in reading about that. Cause like, yeah, I understand I don't have a PhD. Sure, I can go online and get one here in a couple of years, but that's not the prestigious ones that we're looking at.
right.
You know, and not necessarily Eastern, but just the in general thing of like, if you want to teach, you want the PhD, you want to be taken seriously, you go to a, you know, prestigious school to do so. So,
You know, when they were saying, you and I both had this, ideal candidates are risk takers. You know, have open and transparent conversations about their skill set and show how these resonate with the mission of the institution. I'm not faculty, I've never been faculty, I will never be faculty. But I do find that the whole, you know, how does their piece of the puzzle resonate with the mission of the institution? And that's not being on that side of the house. I don't know if there were discussions about that. I don't know if that's something that faculty worry about. You know, are we fulfilling the mission? You know, and I found that an interesting way to look at.
I agree.
Something I'm quite proud of for those of you who got to attend the Plan 2028 update. One of the things that you heard about there is the gains in faculty hires of persons of
Yes.
color and underrepresented groups. Now, this doesn't correlate one-to-one with less prestigious, but if we take into account what Volk and Benedicts have said earlier in the book about the inequities within systems, right? A lot of times these folks are not afforded the opportunity to go to the most prestigious university to conduct the research, whatever it is. And if we bring them here and, oh, look, they look like our students too, that can only be great for us. And I think we've made some very positive strides there. And of course, Bobby, your area, student affairs, has always got a mindset about hiring in ways that reflect the populations of the students you serve.
Well, and I agree, because they also, you know, stated in there that one of the challenges is that faculty are so independent. You know, I do my research, I stay in my area. And so kind of changing the paradigm where we try to continue tearing down silos. You know, I thought that was interesting, always good to read, because I think we're always too siloed at Eastern. And so I liked that part of it. I thought it was interesting when they brought up the parts about tenure. You know, and not wanting to get rid of it on any way, but really changing what it looked like. You know, to make it, you know, maybe contractual, so many years. And I'd never thought of that. I guess that system not working for some of our marginalized groups, that it didn't fit as well. And that was really eye-opening for me.
Tenure is a complicated thing that could be a whole panel in itself. I mean, we know it's designed with this concept of protecting folks, of preserving academic freedom in the classroom and allowing faculty to use their expertise in the ways that are appropriate for learning. But just like, say, a position on the Supreme Court, sometimes it just becomes, I'm here for life. What are you going to do, pal? You know, and that's a tough situation for the chairs to have to deal with, and the associate deans, right? Like, as long as they're not stealing money or murdering the students, you can't move them. And so it creates problems. And then it doesn't open up spaces when you legitimately have a chance where maybe it is time for a faculty member to move on to find a better fit for their needs and for the university's needs, you can't. It's just, you gotta wait. They gotta retire or die, and that's a tough situation to put a university in.
Well, and going back to wanting faculty who are risk takers, who may walk in and go, I don't think this is working. Can we do something different? And it's exactly what you said, but if you've got everybody else sitting on the other side of the table going, no, this is how we've always done it, and it works. And you're the person going, I don't think it is working. The people sitting across the table have a voice in your earning tenure. So how do we want to change and adapt to our student body's needs? And faculty have so much power because they teach the classes, and I think that's got to be a challenge a lot of our faculty are dealing with, because this group of students is much harder to engage. The old methods of teaching may no longer work as effectively. And we're asking people who've been teaching for 30 years to change, and change is hard. So I think that's an interesting factor to think about as we say that higher ed needs to change. Well, how do we support that?
Any other comments from the chat about faculty hiring practices? Okay, if that one doesn't get them talking, this next one will, Bobby.
Yeah, administration, yay. I thought this was interesting, that we say we want a new kind of administrator. Systems thinkers, practitioners, and visionaries. We all say we want transparency. I don't want them hiding behind something. We want them to be able to communicate the institution's vision. But, and this is a big one for us, pursue financial stability, by enhancing the mission of their institution. So I guess my question would be, and this is recorded, right? And you're going to make sure I don't get fired. Do we have an administration that we believe, follows this path? And we're all really quiet.
I'm carefully considering your question.
Yeah. Well, or how do we agree with what they say that we need? Let's rephrase it. Taking our administration out of it, do we agree that this would be an effective type of administration for EIU?
I think in my short time here, I've learned enough about the impasse to know that the folks at EIU really would value the pursuit of financial stability, to be able to be sure that we're going to hit recruitment targets every year, keep those people coming in and successfully leaving in a way that builds our brand and makes us withstand the next one. Because it's going to happen again, right? In higher ed, we're going to have another problem. And we've been talking about the enrollment cliff for many years now. And to whatever extent that you foresee that coming, we're going to have hard times again. And so I know the financial stability would be big. And I think maybe then that means the communication of the vision is like, that's pay to play. Like if you can't do that, then you're not going to be able to achieve the financial stability. Because if we don't believe in what you're doing, then we're not going to work the extra effort to get it done.
I like the concept of transparency. I know that I'm not going to know everything, that there's a level higher above me who have all the information, and I will never have that. But I think it's important to have an administration that I can trust, right? I may not like every decision they make, I won't. But if I can trust they believe they're making the best decision, I can live with that. It's when I look at them and go, what are you thinking? And I can't even in my head take a step back and go, okay, I get that. I don't like it, but I understand it. I think that's where transparency becomes really important.
kind of making clear why you had to make the decision that
Right.
you did, yeah, to help people understand.
Yeah. If I believe they have our best interest at heart, even if I don't love the decision, I'm probably going to be okay.
Mhm.
I do recall when Dr. Gatrell was announced as our next president, sending him an email and saying, congratulations, I look forward to blaming you for everything I don't like at EIU for many years to come, right? Like,
Yeah.
yeah, I know that the choices they have to make, sometimes they must be made very quickly, maybe without broad consultation, and that many of the choices they make, it's not a choice between a good idea and a bad idea. It's a choice among many good ideas, and we just can't do them all. Whether it's a resource limitation that's money or personnel, or we really should be doing A, but if we don't do B, we might not be here to do A, so we're gonna do B. And so I understand that that happens, and it really calls to forward the story of Damocles and the sword, right? Like the sword hanging above King Damocles was never about the danger of a pointy object landing on your head. It was about understanding that all of your decisions cut one way or another, and that no matter what, you're going to mess up.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. I agree with you. I think the financial stability is a huge issue. And I think it impacts admission, because we put all this pressure on you. You've got to bring us the students, and I've said for the last several years, admissions is a department I would not want to work in right now. Because I just think there's so much pressure, so much more than we saw 10, 15 years ago. And I think being a big picture thinker helps us better understand the other departments on campus and what they're dealing with. Because it's really easy for me to go, the advisors are screwing up. What are they, why are they making these decisions? Or, career services, our students aren't getting jobs. What are they doing wrong? And so I think when we evaluate things like we are through this book, and then when we have these opportunities to talk in groups of people we don't see on a regular basis, you start to understand that, okay, it may look like a simple answer from my point of view, but talking to you, I understand why it's not a simple answer. And I think an administrator who can help us see that and who can appreciate it, or an administration who can appreciate it, is really valuable in helping us get through this difficult time. I don't know how you all feel, but these students are challenging. I mean, I love them, but some of them I just want to go, what are you thinking? And knowing that the administration understands that makes it a little easier some days when you've had a really particularly challenged day to go home and go, okay, I can go back tomorrow.
I think that brings it back to what you said earlier, like, we have to stop working in silos.
Yeah.
Like, we really do need to collaborate more, and like, all departments kind of need to work together. The president needs to be involved in everything and hear from everyone.
And I think also administration, even if there is a decision to be made, it would be nice to have those players come in, even if you don't get a lot of input, but to think that you have a little bit of input, because I think people don't always think about what the impact would be on different
Right.
departments or different areas. And then I'm like, oh yeah, you just did that. That just meant, okay, changing banner in the changing banner in the middle of registration. I'm like, what? I mean, so that just kind of foresight into that, to see, okay, what are the problems? Let's get those people in so we can talk about it and see if there would be a better solution to that. And I think sometimes that doesn't happen, and it may be because it has to be a quick decision
Right.
that's being done, but it helps kind of give that buy-in. If you have to do change and you were part of that change, then it's easier to make that change. And just saying, yes, you're gonna do this, and we don't care what the problems are, do it.
Well, and I had a discussion with my VP once because she made a decision I didn't agree with. Yeah, doesn't matter. She's a VP. She gets to do what she wants. But she came down and she knew I didn't agree. She came down and talked to me about it. And I was like, I just appreciate you listening, right? You don't have to change your mind. That's not what this is about. The fact is I am heard. And that means a lot. I have a voice, and you still have information I don't have, and you've got to make the decision you believe in. But that opportunity to be heard, I think really makes a difference. And so an administration that is open to that, who will have those conversations and still do what they think is best. But I appreciate that opportunity to be able and to be comfortable enough to say, no, I just don't agree with what you did,
Yeah. And an interesting thing about administration and thinking about this idea of being practitioners. I mean, almost every administrator was a practitioner of something
Yeah.
at some point, but how long did they have to go away from that practice and move through administrative ranks to get where they are? Things change so much, they don't keep up with those changes as much, and so it's easier to forget. And something that I always think about is, I mean, obviously, if we start at the top with a president, most presidents of universities are going to be former faculty, or occasionally universities will do that fun experiment of let's hire a business person to run this like a business. That'll fix everything. Either way, that's usually the two tracks. And even then it might have been a business faculty member, but sometimes it's a random CEO. But so a university is so broad and so multifaceted, you're probably not going to have a president who can say, yes, I taught this for a couple of years after I was a plumber, and before that I did academic advising, and then I worked in a cafeteria. Like that's not going to happen. And I don't think anyone reasonably expects that. But then as you go lower within administration, right? If you have, say, a director of career services, it's better for that person to have been a career counselor or some kind of job matching something, so that the people then that you're charged to lead know that you understand what they're going through. And if bonus, if you'll actually listen to them when it's different from how you think, right? And among the team I work with every day, I'm really lucky. I feel like to mostly have the kind of relationship where they can say, I understand what you're saying, Danny, but here's why we think you're wrong, and try to convince me otherwise. And we try to, like, something I tried to pick up from a former leader I worked with is those times when we're having a discussion where we're making a group decision versus those times when we are discussing for information where you get a voice but not a vote, right? Those kinds of things. Those are important distinctions, but I'm also lucky enough that many of the people who report directly to me have talked about, the one thing that we appreciated about your candidacy is the practice that you had in the ways that it matches with the duties that we're asked to perform, because it's not just straight advising for my team, and the gateway component throws it all off, but I had similar experience to that. And so, I mean, it's something to know, just as they talk about in this book, that there's an overabundance of application for faculty spots. Every position is going to have multiple qualified applicants. And so all a university and its search team can do is try to find who they think fits the institution, would understand the students, and then if it's an administration position, would understand the practitioners and try to help support them. So it seems like they're kind of asking for common sense here, that like this one isn't that radicalism that they've said in other places, but maybe it is considered, because I'm viewing it from my lens as a lifetime higher ed staff member, and I've never been on the faculty side. And so when they say things like, let's not focus so much on the prestige of the institution or the research or those kinds of things, maybe they are being pretty radical, but I feel like it comes across as common sense. Anybody out there in Zoom want to say anything before we move on to the next one?
I did want to comment that I really like the full circle moment here, when we were talking about traditional experience versus expert knowledge, if I was gonna say anything about it, I feel as if we could do, one way a little bit more than the others in a lot of areas, but talking about collaboration, bringing that all back to that global recommendation of, unity, and that is what we all require to make those executive decisions. So I thought that was a really cool way to kind of end that discussion.
Okay, so professional staff, just to show you all my bias, because I have one on this. But I was reading the book, I found it fascinating that we had 6.5 pages talking about faculty, about 1 page talking about administration, and 3/4 of a page talking about the rest of us. So I found that ironic, but this was written by faculty, so not surprised. And you and I caught on some of the same things. You know, all the positions they mentioned were focused on how we supported the faculty. You know, student affairs, we got 1 line. And, you know, we always feel like we've got a big chip on our shoulder in student affairs anyway. So I was disappointed to get the same feeling from that section. So I don't know if anybody else felt the same or what your thoughts were about that area. You know, they wanted professional staff to be hired with faculty and administration having a say in it, although they did say that they felt that those areas should be involved in hiring in other areas as well. So it wasn't just that. But I think your question was, are there specific positions across campus that having that more, I guess, diverse group involved in the hiring process would be beneficial more than others?
Especially because they related it directly to, you know, those that have direct student responsibilities, which, you know, we could probably argue just about every position on here has that, but there are some more than others, and there are plenty of positions that don't have that diverse hiring committee per se.
Right.
So, yeah, that's kind of where I was going with that too. So, just kind of looking at how that would be a little different.
When I read that, I think a little bit about how hard it can be to get people to show up for interviews on campus. Yeah, I mean, because I know in student affairs, we're being begged all the time, if it's in our division, please, someone show up. So I find it interesting is how are we going to draw the areas in who don't feel directly connected to us to want to engage in that?
Because I think when I was hired, I had a lot on the hiring committee, but when they were like, oh yeah, we're gonna have a session with, it was just the hiring committee, nobody else came up, nobody else.
And were you disappointed in that?
A little bit, just because, but I knew that my husband's a faculty
Yeah.
member here, so I knew what I was getting into, so, but yeah, to just have the same height. You know, there wasn't anybody different, so I'm like, okay, just continue the questions and we'll keep going, so.
I think it's absolutely necessary and great for the candidate to want that, you know, to see how they impact other departments across campus, you know, and I pound this into my students as a speech instructor of like, okay, if you're gonna go up here and you're gonna pick a random topic to give a speech on, your most important goal here is to make it relevant to your audience, you know, give them a reason to listen to you. So I think that that's something that, that as these hiring committees are formed, can do more of across campus. Like, okay, you have this opportunity to come to this open session and here's why. So not just you feel like you should because they're taking on a particular role that you may come in contact with at some point, but this is how it can affect your office in some way, shape or form. This is why you should come and learn more about this person or bring some specific questions. So I do think that's something that can be done a little bit in more detail across our campus specifically, but I understand we all have jobs to do and you know, it takes up a lot of time and whatnot, but just in that initial process of like, hey, here's why your office should come, I think we could do more.
I think when we don't show up, it just shows how much we silent. You know, if I'm in career services, you know, and if I don't see a connection to advising, then I'm not going to go. Except there's clearly a connection to advising from my area. So I do think that that's something we need to maybe change our mindset.
Well, and at the risk of derailing us, I think I have to put in a plug here for some of it has to do with the systems and structures on campus, especially when it comes to the civil service hiring process, for instance, where the hiring manager doesn't find out until like 3 days before when the interviews are scheduled. And this isn't because HR is laughing at us and playing a joke in their office, it's because they're overburdened, underpaid, overwhelmed, right? Like, and so when I get the email from
Yeah.
someone in your division coming on campus and it's 2 days out, well, I've been booked that day for a week.
Yeah.
you know.
That's-
Well, and I think that's the difference in people understanding different roles on campus, because I fall into the same boat. I'm often booked, 1 to 2 weeks in advance. So when someone says to me, hey, there's a meeting you need to be at tomorrow, I'm like, really? That's great. It would have been nice to know ahead of time. So I think that's a lack of understanding that we don't all follow the same schedule, or we don't all have the same freedoms of scheduling ourselves. Because I complain about that on a daily basis.
Well, and kind of along that point too, if you're interviewing multiple candidates for the same position over multiple days, and then it's a few people show up the first day, you get a different group of people the next day, maybe by the fourth one, you've got 2 people that are showing up, so. Yeah,
Very tough. To speak to the bias that you were brave enough to share there, Bobby, I worked in student affairs for 12 years. And the joke we used to make is student affairs, we do the work that faculty stop doing. And, if you go into the history of higher education, right, the faculty used to live on campus with the students. There was no housing department, right? There were no RAs. They used to do all the academic advising, and then they became so busy chasing the tenure path that, that became an extra administrative thing that was passed on to the new person as kind of like punishment or hazing, right? And that's not a good outcome. And research emerged saying that advising needed to have some professional touch, but all these things, admissions, it used to be faculty led, and at some point they could only do so much. And what's the most important thing they could do? What's their best expertise? Oh, it's the delivering of content knowledge. So maybe we could hire Ryan to go and recruit for us and leave this faculty member in the classroom to teach. And then we can hire Mark to run housing, and no faculty member has to sort that out. But then, you end up with things like student affairs often feeling like we're not appreciated for all that we do or all that we mean, or we're just seen as the fun stuff that isn't important, but that tons of research says is absolutely vital to the retention of students.
Well, and I think that goes to having more sessions when we all learn about what we do, right? Because if I don't know what you do, then I'm going to discount it. If I don't know why it's important to the student in front of me, then I don't care that you exist. Not you, anybody, sorry, that was bad. But I do think that's a problem, is we're in our little silos, and we don't see that if our students aren't getting the accommodations and the help they need, they aren't going to be successful in the faculty member's classroom, and you're going to have a harder time working with them if you don't know how you need to approach them and work with them effectively. So, most of us all the time, we're intertwined, even if it's not obvious, and I think that's when, as we silo, which I think really happened during the budget impasse, because if we were watching our friends lose positions, we were asked to do more with less. And so we got really protective of what we do, because that was how we survived. And you want to come out of that and say, okay, I don't have to look at Julie's area and say, well, if they hire one more person there, then I'm not gonna get a raise this year. And we've got to be able to see us as a homogeneous group working to help our students, because that's the center of it. But I think we get so wrapped up in our day-to-day, how do I survive my career, that we sometimes lose sight of why we're doing this.
And because we don't have time to
Yeah.
have those conversations, right? So admissions will do something, and I'm just sitting here like, oh, they have no idea what the life of an advisor is like. The jerks, do they not care? Right? And then admissions is saying, you don't know what real pressure is.
Exactly. Well, and I will tell you, like in my area, we have so many departments now that aren't referring students because they can do resumes, that's easier, or a computer program can do it. And sometimes they're really good and sometimes they aren't. But sometimes we're nickeling and diming each other. going, well, but I can save a position if I add this into my curriculum. So I think it gets interesting on campus. You know, and that's why I thought this book was kind of interesting, because trying to figure out who we want to be moving forward. Is this who we want to be? If people like me say we need to change, well, how do we do that? You know, and how do we all agree on where that change needs to come from and what it looks like? Because my view of the change is probably not gonna match yours. You know, and I'm appalled that I hear this coming out of my mouth, but I kind of like the strategic plan. I hate strategic plans, but I kind of like this one because we didn't just do it and then drop it. You know, it has life, we're getting updates, people are continuing to work on it. That's how we try to change our environment, as much as I hate to agree that I think it's a good thing. So I find the timing of this book really good and interesting.
It goes back to your point about, or reflecting the author's point about administrators who can communicate vision. Because it would be very difficult to list every department or service on campus individually in the strategic plan, but you have to communicate the places that you might fit in across multiple of those pillars, multiple of those themes. And to be able to see like, oh yeah, they're talking about me, I can help with this.
Right. Well, and then keeping it alive. You know, so that's, I think, really important.
So now we have talked about how we could recruit differently, how we could hire differently at faculty, administrator, and staff, professional staff. Last thing we have to talk about is changes to the institution itself. And Amber Webb is on deck to lead us about that one. And so far, I think she's the only person who signed up to do it. And maybe when this is all done, we can actually do something. But at the very least, it has been an interesting conversation. To our friends out in Zoom, do you have any parting thoughts you want to share, or something about how the experience of reading this book has made you feel? I've talked to a couple of people who have attended these events who have said that reading the book either made them angry or somewhat depressed, right? Like that, because sometimes it can feel insurmountable, all the things that we're up against. And so that is what Vulcan Benedicts are trying to do for us, to give us a path out, say if we will be willing to not do things the same way we've always done it, to try something that isn't really that radical, but it's just changing the focus of what we're doing. So we'll try to put all the pieces together next week at 3 o'clock. Appreciate you all being here. Any parting words from our presenters? Yay. Thanks all. Have a great afternoon.
We used to see we kind of came at it the same way.
Oh, yeah.
So that made me happy.
Yeah, absolutely.